Hello, everybody. Hi. Welcome. How are you? Good. I'm Rebecca Stummy. I'm the producer of live events here at LAist, and I just want to welcome you all tonight to this wonderful event with James Beard Foundation. I want to start out by saying that LAist is operating within the traditional homelands of the Gabrielino Yotongva people. We've made a commitment to recognize Southern California's history of displacement, and you can find our complete land acknowledgement statement at laist.com/land. Thanks. And I just want to also thank the James Beard Foundation so much. They are such wonderful partners. We've had such a wonderful time planning this whole series with them. And I want you to hear a little bit more about what they do with the James Beard Foundation. So here to do that is Jamie Faye Bean, their Vice President of Development.
Thank you so much, Becca. Thank you to LAist for this wonderful partnership, and thank you to all for coming out tonight. I do want to give a huge shout out to Home State for those delicious tacos and nachos that I hope everyone got the chance to try. And don't forget, tonight as you leave, we also have Holy Grail Donuts, who will be giving out their donuts. Finally, I hope that you will all join us on August 6th. We will be hosting Taste America Los Angeles, and that is at the Line Hotel and features many stations with some of LA's most exciting chefs, and that is headlined by our 2024 Best Chef California James Beard Award winner, Maynard Lord Lara of Kula Lord, yes. So to read more and to get tickets to that, go to our website at jamesbeard.org. If you scroll down, there's a tile there that says Taste America, and you can find more information and ticketing links. So we hope to see you there. I'm really excited about tonight's panel. We're going to hear about how some of our local chefs here in LA are taking innovative approaches to coping with the climate crisis and the ways in which it's impacting their businesses. Of course, at the James Beard Foundation, we have a long-standing, decades-long commitment to chefs. And that's because we understand that they are powerful innovators, they are powerful influencers, they are problem solvers. They are artists, but they are also entrepreneurs, small business owners, they're anchor tenants in thriving neighborhoods, and they have unmatched influence as a collective when it comes to consumer influence and really understanding all parts of our food systems. They really touch every part of that, from farming to transportation to, again, the consumer piece of that. So we believe very powerfully in chefs. I want to zoom out. You know, we talked about LA. I want to zoom out on a national level and talk about what independent restaurants mean for us. This is the 5th largest employment sector in this country. So it is absolutely huge. It represents over $75 billion in wages annually. It represents over $209 billion in revenue annually. So you can imagine, we all know the small margins that these businesses work with. There is also the fact that any disruption to the supply chain is profoundly challenging for this sector. So climate change, it's very logical if you think about it, it really poses a real threat to this industry that is such a huge part of our economy and to our quality of life in the United States. In fact, the James Beard Foundation, together with the Global Food Institute at George Washington University, earlier this year published a report about the effects of climate change on independent restaurants. And we found that rising temperatures, the rise in extreme weather events that are happening, and the shifts in agricultural patterns that are happening in this country are, in fact, having profound influences on independent restaurants. We are seeing rises in costs, and we're seeing a number of operational challenges. And I believe even, on a casual level, this is very visible to many of us. So we think this is really a huge problem that we need to tackle. We need to figure out how we're going to cope with this. And independent restaurants are actually a very, very important piece of that puzzle. So in response to this, we have mobilized our nationwide network of thousands of chefs around our Climate Solutions for Restaurant Survival campaign that launched earlier this spring. And the purpose of that campaign is to mobilize chefs to help raise awareness, educate our federal policymakers, and to galvanize action to mitigate the impacts of climate change on this country, and specifically the independent restaurant industry. As part of that campaign, we submitted a letter to Congress a couple of months ago calling for climate smart solutions within the next Farm Bill. That was signed by over 600 chefs in all 50 states. So again, we're seeing a really powerful voice here, a powerful collective voice, and the work continues. The Climate Solutions Campaign is active across the country on Capitol Hill and in districts in many, many states. So I do hope that piques your curiosity, again, to go to our website, jamesbeard.org. Scroll down, you'll see a tile there about the Climate Solutions Campaign, and I'd love for you to read up. You'll have links to the report with George Washington University and more information on what we are doing to tackle this really this big crisis. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Becca. And thank you once again to LAist. Really excited to hear more about how this is playing out in LA.
Thank you so much, Jamie Faye. And I also want to invite you all back to our last event in this series with James Beard Foundation. That's going to be on September 19th, The Women Who Make LA Delicious. I think it's going to be great. Come right back to that. And I know that you all like food. So on July 31st, come back for our ice cream social. We'll be talking to 3 different ice cream purveyors here in Los Angeles. Gab Chabran, our food and culture editor, will be leading that discussion. So please come back and join us on July 31st for another food event. And also a huge thanks, because this project was made possible with support from California Humanities. That's a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. You can find out more about them at www.cal.hum.org. We are so appreciative of their support. All right, that's a lot of talking for me. Couple more things. In case of an emergency, there's an exit the same way that you came in, and then there's also doors behind these curtains. And if you could just silence any noise-making devices, just so it's more pleasant for your fellow attendees and you won't disturb what's happening on stage. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to announce this absolutely stacked panel for tonight. We have Michael Cimarusti from Providence. Yes, give it up. We have John Cleveland from Post and Beam, also doing a residency at Abernathy's downtown, and Sarah Kramer from Kismet. Yes, and your host for tonight is LAist science reporter Jacob Margolis.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. All right. We do have an awesome panel. Thank you so much for coming. Hi. I'm Jacob Margolis. I'm the science reporter with LAist, and I cover all things climate change, environmental, whatnot. And so I'm really excited to talk about this because I also love food. I love their restaurants, and I think there's a lot to explore here. So we're gonna, at the end, run through a Q&A. So please try to think of a bunch of questions if you can. And as we all know, climate change is pretty bleak, so we're going to also try to find some hope, I guess, along the way in terms of, restaurants constantly have to innovate, figure out how to adapt with the times, and these folks seem to be doing a pretty good job. So we do have 3 wonderful guests tonight. Chef John Cleveland, who is the head chef and owner of the well-renowned Post and Beam. It is a casual fine dining restaurant in South LA, draws influences from Southern soul food, Carolina barbecue, coastal seafood, Neapolitan cuisine. You call it California comfort food. I like that. We also have Chef Sarah Kramer. She is the chef and co-owner of Kismet, and she began her professional career at Blue Hill Stone Barns, came to LA in 2014, opened Kismet, which is an awful lot of vegetables and awesome meat dishes, and Kismet Rotisserie, which has 3 different locations, and soon a 4th in Pasadena, which I will be going to for lunch. And then we have Michael Cimarusti, executive chef and owner of the 2 Michelin star restaurant Providence Seafood, New England seafood restaurant Connie and Ted's. And thanks everyone for being here. I really appreciate it. So, yeah. Awesome. All right, so I do want to sort of set the stage first and explain a couple of different ways that climate change, that we know how it's impacting kind of the food system. Just a couple of different points. Hotter temperatures obviously have meant more drought, which has meant things like made growing like wheat more difficult. Salmon, for instance, which need cold water to survive and keep going, have been dying off as a result of hotter waters. Wildfire smoke has been impacting grapes and vineyards throughout California. Extreme heat is also putting stress on workers. So we're going to talk about some of these different things, but I do want to start, and I open it up to all three of you, with what have you started to notice? You've all been in the restaurant industry for some time. What have you started to notice, especially when it comes to ingredients, change, I would say, in the past 10 years or so, 10 to 15 years, be it seafood, wheat, produce? Yeah. Whoever wants to go. John?
Thanks for asking. I think
Yeah.
there's been a ton of change in the last 10 years, specifically in the last 5 years. I think, climate has played a major part for sure, but it's affected a lot of the supply chains as well. So, we do a semi-seasonal cuisine, a lot of produce, which is affected by the seasons and the climates and how they run. And we do a small bread program through our pizzas and brioche and little things like that. But I think, in the last 10 years, especially in the last 5 years, we've seen increases in just prices like that I've never witnessed before. And I think now it's starting to stabilize a little bit. Hopefully it stays that way for a little bit longer. But, between just random events, wiping out crops or making it extremely difficult to transport. I've seen cornmeal and wheat go up tenfold in the last 10 years. I remember buying, 50 pounds of cornmeal and wheat for less than $20 at one point. And now, I've seen the prices go all the way up to $80, so we've always tried to figure it out, but yeah.
And let's go down the line, Michael, in terms of, you do an awful lot of seafood. And so we had talked also about sea urchin becoming a bit of an issue, I think you said, with warming waters off the coast of Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we only serve wild seafood at the restaurant with the exception of like shellfish, like clams and mussels and oysters and things like that. So we rely really on local fishermen and small boat fishermen, and our local fisheries have really been like pummeled by the climate here, especially in California. You touched on, king salmon. There's been no king salmon season in California for the last 2 years. A lot of that has to do with, drought, clearly, and a result of climate change, rising temperatures in our lakes and streams, especially the streams, obviously, which the salmon use to reproduce. If there's less water in those streams, the water obviously warms to a degree where the eggs just simply can't survive. So even if the salmon are fortunate enough to be able to spawn back to the area where they were born, unfortunately the young just don't make it. Sometimes the eggs just don't make it at all. And then you mentioned sea urchin again. This is another thing that's like definitely been affected by climate with rising water temperatures. It causes often like blooms that are detrimental to shellfish. And then of course, like rising sea temperatures make for more violent storms at sea. And when you have violent storms at sea, fishermen cannot fish. Just that's the way it works. More storms, more wind. These are all things that keep fishermen from plying their trade, and that drives up prices, makes seafood more scarce, and of course, that becomes very challenging if you're trying to run a seafood restaurant. So, climate is definitely affecting pretty much every aspect of what we do.
Besides king salmon, are there any specific dishes, seafood dishes, that you don't see being able to make anytime soon, or potentially have to delay, that in the past you really enjoyed?
Well, I mean, I just think like our local seafoods have just become more scarce as a result of all these factors. So where in past years, even just last year, the year before, like California sea urchin or Santa Barbara sea urchin, which is really like the pride of the California coast. And it's prized not only here in California, but you'll see it on the menu if you travel to New York, and sometimes you'll see it in the markets in Japan. But it's for many, many weeks on end here at the beginning of the year, it was just unavailable. When the water warms, just like all shellfish, sea urchins spawn. And when they spawn, you can't harvest them. I mean, you can, but they're just basically worthless. And that coupled with what we were talking about before, the effects of wind and weather, kept urchin divers out of the water as well. So made for a pretty dismal sea urchin season. I just recently came back from a couple weeks on the East Coast, and now we have a more consistent supply of Santa Barbara sea urchin. But, that's like one of those staple fisheries that our local fishermen really relied on. And it's becoming more and more difficult to be an urchin diver here in California.
And Sarah, with such a heavy, I guess, vegetable forward menu, are there any particular vegetables that you've seen just take a major hit? I think Imperial, possibly down in Imperial County, something like that.
I'm not exactly sure about a particular vegetable that's taken a huge hit. I just think the timing of everything changes and seasons change a lot when we're dealing with climate change. And some things have like much shorter growing seasons, or they're being maybe phased out for other things that are more favored by the hotter temperatures. I'd say that also like the combination of drought and then like heavy atmospheric rains is really awful for farmers, and like especially for delicate things like strawberry plants or like stone fruit or any kind of fruit tree, like the blossoms being knocked off the tree really early in the season, and then you lose the whole crop. It's making farmers a lot less willing to invest in those crops, and I think over time we'll see them dwindle. In addition to, I think the younger generation of kids who are the kids of those people on those farms not wanting to pick up the mantle of working on those farms, also because of how difficult it's become, and then it's also becoming very difficult to find workers on farms, and often in restaurants as well. So it goes down in the line the whole way. But yeah, I would say that specific to vegetables, I haven't seen anything quite yet that's like suffering completely. We have a lot of different microclimates here, so we have a lot of access to a lot of things, but I think over time we'll just see fewer and fewer local farms, and I think that the selection will get smaller on the whole.
Yeah, I think the strawberry industry got absolutely obliterated 2 years ago for a period of time, especially when it was really, really heavy rains in the Oxnard. They grow a ton of strawberries in the Oxnard, Ventura area, obviously. And down in Imperial Valley, my understanding is, Imperial County, is that the Colorado River issue in terms of not enough water is obviously becoming quite a problem for sustaining some of the vegetable farms down there. So, but Michael, you also mentioned asparagus when we spoke. There was some sort of giant asparagus that possibly all of you have had experience with that I am not familiar with. Please tell us about this giant asparagus story that I had never heard before.
Yeah, it's the story of Roscoe Zuckerman, who's Sacramento River Delta farmer. It's absolutely legendary. His asparagus is legendary. You'll find it in restaurants in San Francisco, and of course you'll find it in restaurants here in Southern California, because they used to make the trek. You used to be able to go to buy Zuckerman's asparagus at the Wednesday market and the Sunday market in Hollywood. And it was always one of those things, like I think all of us as chefs, we equate the change of seasons with certain ingredients, and asparagus is certainly one of those things. Like it's spring when the asparagus is in our local markets, and Roscoe's asparagus is like a benchmark type ingredient. You just don't find better in this country. I don't know that I've ever had better. And this year it was something you could always rely on, seeing them at the markets and stuff. It's gotten to the point where it's very difficult for him to tend his land anymore. He can't really compete against the price of Mexican asparagus because the labor is much cheaper down there, and obviously he has to pay a much different wage in California in order to harvest his crops. And so now he has to sell his whole crop to a wholesaler, and we don't have, or you don't have, as farmers market shoppers here in Southern California, the ability to go and buy that product anymore. And I think that's just endemic of some of the things that Sarah was talking about, where it's just being a farmer in California, maybe anywhere in this country anymore, is just a much, much more difficult proposition than it ever was. But California presents problems that other farmers don't have because of the lack of water that we suffer from. And so much of the so much water is, diverted from other things to agriculture here in this state, and it's important because we are the salad bowl for the whole country, obviously. So, it's important that we have aquaculture, but distributing that water has all sorts of effects. Salmon, the lack of salmon being one of them. If you take water out of our rivers and streams, that's obviously it's going to have an effect on the inhabitants of those waters, and so.
Yeah, it's been a big discussion up at the Klamath. They're taking down the Klamath Dam right now up in the Humboldt area, Eureka. And a big discussion around that was the holding back the water was impacting the salmon runs. And the hope is that the increase in water that they're going to let run down the river will also help with those fish. So hopefully that actually works out. And so when it comes to your menus with these micro seasons changing, and all of you do, I shift your menus quite often. How is it impacting menu planning? Like, do you have more trouble relying on ingredients showing up from distributors? If you are going to the farmer's market that you don't think they're gonna be available. Sarah, you talked quite a bit about this as well in terms of you have a number of restaurants, especially the rotisserie, Kismet Rotisserie. And so, you have to accommodate both sort of more of a fine dining and a casual concept.
Yeah, I mean, at Rotisserie, we're really interested in consistency. That's the whole model. And we certainly rely on our suppliers, and we have to get really creative when something is no longer available because of supply chain issues, or we have to take the hit. Like if our chicken no longer becomes available from the farms that we normally get it from, then we have to use a different, more expensive chicken, and it is what it is. We can't pass that along to the customer. I think I mentioned also on our call, and I don't want to say it publicly, but I know that obviously, obviously, like avian flu is a big potential problem for us. That's not unrelated to climate change and not unrelated to the state of the world, and industrial agriculture generally. And so that fear is not we're not immune from that kind of fear, and people even just associating chicken broadly or poultry broadly with the fear of that. So there's a lot of looming threats. And definitely it's easier with a menu that's dynamic like at Kismet or like at Providence. I think like even if we're generally planning to have asparagus at the beginning of spring or late spring or whenever it comes, we still are very flexible, and we have the ability to be dynamic in that way. And very often decisions aren't being made until kind of day of or day before. But so it's easy to like roll with the punches, or easier to roll with the punches in a concept like that that is more considered. But in a really stable business, you constantly have to think about things in a much bigger picture way. So we kind of have our first line, then our second line, then our third line of what we're willing to, or what we have to work with.
So do you just have to eat the additional cost that keeps on climbing? Is that sort of the deal? And you just hold on and hopefully it's not too much?
I think when you eat the cost, you end up going out of business. One of the things I think I've loved so much about cooking in LA is how welcoming everybody is to new things and being creative. Like I think there's a quote. It's like the enemy of art is the absence of limitation, right? And I think we get more accepted on creating new ideas and different things, which makes sense. Seasonal menus like really work, When Chef talked about how the asparagus really hit with Zuckerman, like Delta asparagus was like on everybody's menu, I think we had a dish that was a Delta asparagus dish, and once that hit happened, we changed our menu, man, and like you educate your customers. It's just like, hey guys, we're not doing this anymore. We're gonna try this. And like collard greens has always been a staple on our menu, and I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had a really rough winter. Like wiped out winter greens for a little bit and had to take collard greens off the menu, had to make the same dish with different greens.
What was the customer response to that?
Negative. Negative. but like it's very accepting at the same time. Like it's an education process. You educate your team and how to talk to your guests, and it's an explanation, man. And I love cooking in LA because of it, because you can recreate and create new things, and it's really welcomed if you do it really well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so have you noticed flavor? I'm just curious, have you noticed flavor changing as well over time with any of these products? The answer could be no, but I definitely have to ask because, yeah, if you get tomatoes that get hit with too much rain at a certain point, they get really not as flavorful. Yeah.
I think what you notice more is like seasons come and go a little quicker than you would want them to. Like cherries are over. Local cherries are over.
So fast.
Yeah, so quick. Or like peas are only good for a certain period of time. When peas used to be, you could count on having like really good, tender, delicious, tiny peas that you don't have to shuck twice, which is the bane of any prep cook. If you, we'll talk about that later. Or fava beans. Fava beans go from like being these wondrous little things that are just sweet and you don't even have to peel them really, or you can grill the whole pods and eat them just like that. And then when the weather warms and the peas get exposed or beans get exposed to a little bit more heat, suddenly they start growing much larger. They become much starchier, and now it's something that like goes from being just absolutely delectable and delicious and craveable to something that's just like, just reminds me of when I was a kid and my mother tried to make me eat lima beans, which I don't know anybody, like raise your hands if you like lima beans. Don't like them. That's everybody's gonna, I don't get it. We're an alien race or something. I don't understand anybody that likes lima beans, but.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that another
But same
day.
thing with artichokes too. I feel like artichokes get really woody really quickly.
That's
and
true.
Just the same thing that you're saying about things just have such a short season for them to be in their perfect peak.
Yeah.
And then they just turn into something that you still like, but you're kind of suffering a bit because you know what it was, what it could be.
Yeah. And when it comes to, I think all of us, in theory would like to buy, I would say, the most environmentally friendly product. We could argue all day about organic, biodynamic, et cetera, and what is the most environmentally friendly in certain regards. But I'm curious what you think that what is the responsibility of restaurants when it comes to purchasing product, sourcing product that is more environmentally friendly? Like, how do you weigh that against the cost, obviously, as well? What is the tipping point?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I'm happy to speak first because we have this conversation internally all the time because we run, this takeout operation that we have to very often make choices between sustainable product, sustainable packaging, or wages. And very often we want to put people first. And I think that if we have the opportunity to service our employees before making the more sustainable choice, we will always choose that. So I wish that I could say that sustainability from like an environmental perspective is number one. I want it to be, but it can't be when you're like dealing with real people. And even if you weigh the short-term versus long-term benefits, but you have to think about what you actually have control over. And I know that we have control over the wages of our employees, and that is also a huge concern within this industry as well. So I would say that it is second tier for us, unfortunately.
What is the cost difference generally between an organic and a conventional strawberry, say?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know.
I mean, it's substantial enough where it's going to be over the course of several
it's hard to.
yeah.
It depends on who you're buying from, and it depends on what you mean by conventional versus organic. And as I'm sure a lot of people here know, that even at farmers markets, a lot of things aren't certified organic, and that a lot of them are growing organically, but the process is cost prohibitive, et cetera, and like bureaucratic. And so I would say that that's not like the best marker of a high quality ingredient. So always go to the farmers markets. And there's a range of cost and there's a range of quality and flavor at the farmers markets, but you can make those choices within your restaurants, whether you want the perfect strawberry or something that will be good for the purpose you're using for. It also depends on what you're doing with it, whether it's like a fresh strawberry that you want to highlight as a perfect fresh strawberry, or whether you're cooking it or whatever.
Yeah.
I think Sarah
yeah.
doesn't give herself enough credit, because I think, like, first and foremost, you're looking for flavor, right? And usually, like, things that taste good have been raised by someone that cares about them. And, like, if you're a good, the way I look at it, like, if you're a good steward of the land, or if you're a good steward of the sea, you're going to create better ingredients, period. You know what I mean? And so I give yourself a little
Yeah,
credit.
I do. But there are certain purposes where, you know, if it's going into, and not every chef will agree with this, but, you know, we definitely have to watch our costs. You know, we're not we don't consider ourselves to be a very high-end restaurant. We're like a middle-of-the-road restaurant, although we put as much care, we try to care about it as much as a very high-end restaurant. But, you know, we have to make those cost choices very frequently. And so it's like, if it's going into ice cream, we might not pick the perfect strawberry, but if it's going to be on a plated dessert, then we will.
Yeah. We also had talked about the impact of heat in kitchens. One thing I remember working in some kitchens and just needing to duck into the walk-in because I was getting absolutely hammered and feeling pretty bad. You know, the walk-in always helps, or to just, you know, be upset in the walk-in and spend some time by yourself. But it's so I would love to understand the kind of impact that the heat is also having on not just the employees in the kitchen, but also the infrastructure within the kitchen, and how y'all are working to deal with it.
I mean, heat's the heat, man.
Yeah.
You know, summer's always going to summer.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I started cooking, working in kitchens and that didn't have air conditioning, you know, so you just had a fan, and like, you got to fall in love with working with sweat, man. You can't be afraid of it. You absolutely can't be afraid of it. It does create a lot more challenges that I didn't foresee when I was younger. Like, you know, you have to do more maintenance on your HVAC systems. When COVID happened, we had to add a lot of more filters into our just heating ducts, air ducts, everything, you know. And you do have to be responsible with how challenging you make it to work in your kitchen if you want productive hours in your kitchen. You don't want to just waste time because you got to cool off every hour. So
I remember being in the kitchen at Campanile when Mark Peel, you know, was around and running it, and they had the open wood fire oven or a grill going, and no joke, it had to have been 140 degrees in there. It was unbelievably hot. I cannot imagine working a 12-hour shift amongst that. So hats off to you. That's intense. I get frustrated when the AC goes out here. So is there something that you would like legislators to do to step in to sort of help y'all along?
I mean, I think like it's the simple things, like, you know, require that every restaurant composts. Mm-hmm. Require, you know, manufacturers to use less single-use plastics. There are just so many things. I mean, honestly, like the supply chain, I think the supply chain that is available to us, unless you really like put in the work, wants to give you whatever's cheapest. Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily mean like the product that's in the container, but whatever's the cheapest way to get that from their door to your door, that's how they want to bring it. And, you know, that's how they want to sell it. So like, that's been something that we've taken put a lot of energy into recently, is like eliminating as much plastic from the products that we bring into the restaurant as possible. You know, having our purveyors, like seafood purveyors and things like that, rather than bring us styrofoam boxes, to bring us their seafood in reusable totes, so that they bring the fish in or the product in a tote, and they unload it, and then they bring it back and they wash the tote and they use it again tomorrow, as opposed to more styrofoam or more cardboard. Things like that. I do believe that there is room to regulate things like that, because I think the industry is not going to self-regulate, period. That's not going to happen. And I don't mean the restaurant industry, I mean the industry, all industry. They're just not going to do it. You know, it's the kind of thing that, yes, it takes more effort, takes more thought, and it takes more money in order to create change like that. But I think it's absolutely necessary, and we're at a point in this world where we either start moving the needle in the right direction, or it's going to be too late. And I think we all have come to grips with that in recent years. And with the administration that looks like they're going to take over next year, it's going to make things that much worse because we're going to kick the can down the road for another 4 years. So I think it's important that we all start to embrace the little things that we can do to make the world a little bit cleaner, better, more efficient, less wasteful.
But when you have that balance between cost and, so should some of these costs be subsidized at some point? Like if you're trying to sustain multiple, where you are making those decisions that you're talking about, how, and the cost of whatever packaging goes up.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, at least for a business, again, like mine, that's really takeout focused, is one of my businesses, that if they could subsidize the cost of eco-friendly packaging, and if they could actually subsidize the production of eco-friendly packaging and provide better options, because the current options that are out there for eco-friendly packaging are garbage, and I'd be happy to talk about that for a while, but it is very difficult for us to source eco-friendly packaging, period. But if they could subsidize the cost of what is available so that it could match the price of the things that people are using because that's what they can afford, that would make a huge difference. And if it more broadly, if we were able to subsidize the production of those things instead of subsidizing, corn and soy, et cetera, in large-scale agriculture, I think that would be a better use of, all of our money, all of our tax money.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually, and I'm diving, for another story right now, diving deep into sanitation, which is more exciting than it sounds. It's quite a world. A lot of that packaging and whatnot is very far from being actually compostable and sustainable. And so I don't know if there's a really good way to sustainability through packaging necessarily, but you do have consumers who want to, and restaurant owners who do want to make a difference and have as positive of an impact as possible. And so you guys sit around and spin about this at all and consider it? I mean, I know I do personally.
During the pandemic, it killed me.
Yeah.
When like we had to rely on to-go, food for for the survival of the business, to keep people employed. It was, oh my God, like the packaging that we were going through was just like.
Welcome to my world, Mike.
No, I know. I can imagine it probably keeps you up at night.
It's hard, but it's also like the opposite side of the spectrum is that we're providing food to a wide audience, and when we consider our priorities, we never wanted to be an elite business, and we wanted to have a broad audience. So this is one answer to that. Yeah. But yeah, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult pill to swallow. All the packaging, we don't like it.
Lab-grown meat. You're gonna cook it anytime soon?
Not for me. It's not for me.
Okay. All right.
It feels like giving up on the planet. Yeah. All that stuff. Yeah. Lab-grown meat, lab-grown fish.
Eat more vegetables.
Lab-grown proteins, yeah. It feels like we're just
Why
throwing our
grow
heads
it in
up.
a lab?
Huh?
Why grow it in a lab?
I don't know, because we could go down the rabbit hole. But I'm just curious if y'all had, if y'all would serve that at your stuff.
But also the people that are doing that, like, it would be more. I would have like a warmer thought about it if they were doing it for the right reasons, which is to feed people that are hungry. But that's not why they're doing it. It's not at all why they're doing it. You know what I mean? People are doing it to, to just turn a dollar.
Yeah. Questions? Want to open it up. Thank you so much for talking and taking the time. But yeah, anybody would like to ask, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. I heard some things about legislation, and we know that can be a dead end or a very, very long road, too long for solving the problems. What can restaurateurs do to have, we get things done by joining together? And there's the man that was Obama's chef, and he's doing the Last Supper, which he's serving. It was on a TED Talk on TED Radio Hour. He's serving foods that he says, if this continues in this way, you won't be able to get any of these foods. So he serves a meal. So in educating people that way. And I'm one, or all of you could do something like that, but I'm wondering if there's anybody that can get a lot of restaurateurs together to do that type of thing, really show the impact and do something great that people would learn a lot from.
Well, I know this organization called the James Beard Foundation. They've got quite a bit of pull with restaurateurs.
We're actually working now too with a group that's in Italy that certifies restaurants as being plastic free, and we're just at the absolute ground floor of working with these people. But they also, once you become a part of this, they will help you find products that you might otherwise have used that are sold in some sort of plastic container, but they will give you resources for pretty much everything that you need that is free of plastic. So I think there are people out there. I mean, we have to pay to get this certification and to work through their program, but I feel like it's worthwhile. Like a chef that I know, that we all know, that he's a French chef and he's very well known in the world. But he did a little research, or he had someone do a little research about how much plastic wrap they used in a year at his restaurant, and it's a small restaurant. But he basically determined that in a year at his restaurant that they use enough plastic wrap to stretch to the moon and halfway back. So think about that.
What would you sub out? What would you sub out though for plastic wrap? It's so useful.
Compostable plastic wrap.
Parchment paper.
Really? For all the
or wax,
containers?
like
Yeah,
wax cloth. That's one option, or just containers with lids. It's another option. But it's
You seem like you have something to say
No,
about
I mean,
it.
all of these are the right answers. There just
Yeah.
needs to be a product compelling enough for more people to use it, because it can be a lot of very well-intentioned chefs who have the bandwidth and the money really to be able to invest. Lids, I think, are a great solution on the whole. Making your restaurant plastic free is very difficult.
Of course.
And so I feel like there needs to be something available as like a viable alternative for all of these places that do not have the bandwidth, for the majority of restaurants out there that do not have the bandwidth to do anything but that. And that's the solution that I feel like someone should be working on. Of course, we are all too busy to work on that.
Yeah.
But I would love for someone to work on it.
I mean, it's kind of tough for restaurants when you think about getting a conglomerate or a bunch of restaurants together that want to do the same thing. I think we all, like, if we're in the industry for any amount of time, we definitely want to be more economic, efficient. But you're dealing with, especially in a environment like LA, like how many new restaurants pop up, a year, a season. And you think of these restaurants, not everybody who's a restaurateur has been a restaurateur for a long time. It's a lot of newcomers to the environment. And if we don't educate ourselves or create like some standards on how we offer products, then, it's hard to regulate that, man. I think we all want to, but it becomes a price war.
Well, you also need to be able to run down to Smart and Final when you guys happen to run out of plastic wrap or something else, and pick it up really quickly in the middle of service. And that's not really an option, I guess, at this moment. I have used the compostable plastic wrap, some of it, and I can see why people have stuck with the gnarly stuff for sure, as it melted together into one giant compostable tube in my cabinet above the oven. Yeah, but I think the goals are there definitely and are worth pursuing.
But I also think it's like all this change, like it has to be just like incremental. It's small,
Yeah,
like it's like little small pivots that if collectively we, and by we I mean everybody in this room, just is a little bit more conscious about the decisions that we make. Like God, it's just insane.
I mean, if not, it's pretty depressing. Like,
Yes.
I think that holding on to those little wins can definitely help.
But those little wins, like, when brought together, can really change things. You know what I mean? Like instead of going to Starbucks every day and getting a brand new plastic cup, like bring a cup. Like how we all do it, right? I go to a coffee shop every morning, to get a cold brew for my drive in, and that's why I carry this thing, and even that, it's like it's a little thing that we can do, but if you get a coffee every morning, let's say 300 mornings a year, that's 300 plastic cups that are not going to wind up in a landfill somewhere. That's a big change. Multiplied by everybody sitting in this audience, that's a big change. That's why we have to think about things.
Yeah.
Hi there. Thanks for coming out. My question is regarding how you design your menu towards what consumers are demanding nowadays, and just towards your own interests in conservation and climate and whatnot, around the fostering the aspiring flexitarians and reducitarians. Like, how are you designing menus to help those aspiring reducitarians eat the way that they would prefer to eat?
I've never heard that term before.
I have not either.
What is a reducitarian?
Sure, yeah. So a reducitarian is and a flexitarian, they're basically people that they don't want to give up meat, but they recognize that there's health and climate implications, and so they want to eat less meat, but they're just always looking for options that don't sacrifice on taste, but help their health and the environment.
Got it. Well, I feel like I have a little bit of an advantage in terms of responding to this, just because that's how we've designed our restaurants from the start. Sarah, my partner, and I have always been interested in serving less meat and more vegetables. And our very first restaurant that we opened here was a vegetarian restaurant, and that is not a particularly viable model financially. So we've basically at the rotisseries we added like chicken, even though it seems like it's what it's all about. It's a rotisserie. It really is. We like to joke that it's a vegetarian restaurant with chicken, because it is a vegetarian restaurant with chicken. It's just like that. The chicken is the anchor, but that the rest of our menu is vegetarian. And at Kismet, we've always designed the menu to really be focused on seasonality and on all the vibrant vegetables, especially being here in Southern California. We have such access that it makes it really easy, and that's always been our goal, and we've always wanted vegetables and plant food to be at the center and meat to be at the periphery, and to have it be more like flavor as opposed to the centerpiece.
I don't know, man.
How are you serving reducitarians?
I don't know. I try to design menus that are less focused on meat and proteins, and I just don't have the demand with my cuisine, with my menus. I for whatever reason, always attract more meat eaters, and we do a thing where we try to, we do comfort food. So we try to pair classic comfort food dishes and create a more produce and vegetarian version of it. We do Dungeness crab cakes, we do vegan crab cakes, we do Salisbury steak, we do a mushroom steak, we do, all these different things. But it never ends up being a large part of what my customers consume. So, we've always been creative, but everybody still's eating short rib and oxtail, so.
We're kind of closing in on the time, but so if anyone wants to jump in with some extra questions.
So I think the people in this room who listen to the radio station I do, I know that I support independent restaurants anytime I can. I will, that's number one. If I can avoid anything with a Sodexo, whatever, I will. And I go to the farmer's market and I want to shop locally, but it does feel like a battle against the great corporations that are a race to the bottom price-wise. So beyond what we're already doing, are there other things we're not thinking about? How can we go further than that to support what you guys are up to?
I think, thank you for supporting independent restaurants and independent radio. I think that that's a great perspective. I would say that if you can manage to cook more at home and then really try to dedicate those dollars to the places you believe in, that counts for a lot, and not to sort of succumb to the big corporate machine out there. Because I was just saying before we started, earlier when we just arrived, that I'm worried that the middle, like in terms of restaurants and access, the middle is going to completely fall away, and that it's just going to become cheap fast food or really high-end dining that's out of reach for most consumers. And obviously we're very much in the middle and trying to service the broad community there. But it's a deep fear of mine, not even specific to my businesses, but specific to my beliefs as a person, that's where we're headed. And so I think more people who think about it more critically and want to make sure they're supporting independent restaurants and knowing where their food is coming from and knowing who the people are behind what food they're consuming is most important, and to make those choices really actively, and then to save dollars by cooking at home as much as possible and getting crafty with that also.
I mean, in terms of in terms of the greatest environmental impact you can have at home, it really is cutting meat, like hands down, just across the board. For anyone wondering, but yeah, any additional questions? I love meat, so it's tough. Yeah.
Hello. I was wondering if any of you buy anything from like wild foragers. Like, is that a thing? Do you think that's something to be encouraged?
That's cool.
I see negatives and positives to that.
We do, yeah. We use like wild mushroom. To me, like wild food is something that's always fascinated me, and I think it's a connection to like our collective past when we were all like hunter-gatherers. And I also think it, when those kinds of foods go away, like ramps and wild mushrooms and wild greens and things like that, it's symbolic of an environment that's failing. If you've got an old growth forest that gets sufficient rain, you're gonna have mushrooms, and you're going to have wild greens, wild edibles, and things like that. And the more things like that disappear, it's like a bellwether for the environment. It's just a signal that, that the world is changing and not for the better. We use a lot of wild stuff, and it's always been something that's fascinated and intrigued me. And I forage myself and used to be a member of the Los Angeles Mycological Society, which I'm not necessarily proud of that, but like if you want to see a room full of nerds, go to a mycology convention, and you'll see a bunch of nerds. But it's a lot. It's a wonderful pursuit, I think. And we deal with this one couple that are foragers they live on the Central Coast, but they forage as far north as like Fort Bragg. And they it's a husband and wife, they're retirees. He was a geologist. And as a geologist, he used to do a lot of surveying of lands in the Central Coast for mineral rights and that kind of stuff. And then he would see all these mushrooms, like chanterelles and porcini and morels and all this stuff. And now that he's retired, that's what he spends his time doing. So once a week, like he and his wife will go on a foraging expedition, maybe 2 or 3 days out of the week. And then one day a week, they'll drive down to Los Angeles and deliver us the most majestic, beautiful, perfect mushrooms that you've ever seen. Like whether it's golden chanterelles, which are native to California, or white boletes, which is one of the rarest wild mushrooms in the world, or just regular king boletes, which you find up and down the coast in California. And it's to me, like that, having that connection with wild foods is an important part of our collective past. I love working with wild ingredients.
I just hope the mushrooms are still around for when I retire, because that's my retirement plan.
To forage.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it is great. They're super happy. He sends me videos from the field. He'll send like video like creeping up on a little patch of like porcini, and send me videos of his wife like digging the porcini out of the ground. It's wonderful. I've shared them with several people in this audience. I know exactly what I'm talking about.
The LA Mycology Club.
They're not. Well, like I said, they live in the Central Coast, but you
Yeah.
know, but it's, oh my God, when they show up, it's like everybody, all the cooks gather around, and it's wonderful. It's exciting. Like to me, and that's why I'm so fascinated also with wild fish, because like there's zero intervention, you know, up until the point of harvest. It was always going to be there. You know what I mean? And nobody had to do anything. Nobody planted a seed. No one cultivated the land. Nothing. It just is there. And you know, and so it just takes people with that particular set of skills to go and harvest it, and realize its quality and care for it properly, and then bring it to market. That's a magical thing. If we lose connection with that, it'd be horrible, absolutely horrible.
All right, last question. It's kind of selfish. What should I go buy at the farmer's market this weekend? Because I want to really impress my guests that come to my house.
Wiser melons.
Gotta go with Wiser melons. They're the best melons in the city.
Peppers, man, it's pepper season. All sorts of beautiful peppers at the market right now. Yeah.
Big on peaches right now.
Yeah.
Riger makes like the best peaches you've ever had. Yes, it's peach season. Peach cobbler all day.
All right, peaches, melons, and
Peppers.
sounds delicious. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Oh, I think we got to wrap up. We're hitting time, but you seem. Let's ask the question. Yes, grind it.
It doesn't
Let's do
have
it.
anything to do
With climate change or food?
with climate, man-made, natural
Okay,
variability,
yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
It has to do with these three, because you should be congratulated for your efforts and your courage in trying to be a single business, single location entrepreneur in this market. There's a line in Jerry Maguire, the old movie with Tom Cruise, where he says to Cuba Gooding Jr., his only athlete that he's serving as an agent for, he's frustrated with him, and he says, being your agent is an up at dawn, work all day, pride-swallowing siege that I will never fully tell you about. And I hope that's not your experience on a daily basis. But I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm a CPA, I do taxes, and I don't want any clients out of the room. But I'm sure you have all spent some time lying in bed looking at the ceiling, wondering about your finances. And I'm not asking you to respond, but
More about life choices, really.
everybody in the room here gets to go to your restaurant and enjoy all of your creativity and all of your generosity, and then we get to go home, and I just want to say thanks for being there.
Yay. I couldn't say it any better than that. Thanks to James Beer, the LAist staff, my wonderful guests, and
Thanks, Dad.
thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Not much.